Right. The first paper that we'll look at here is one that I call Parasites as Probes for Biodiversity. It was one that I published with Mary L. Campbell in um, when I was at UC Davis in 1992. We wrote the paper in 1991. We got it published in about 1992. In 1992, we're going to use this as an example to show you the different methods of citations in a paper, for instance. So the very first paragraph there, you can see there's a couple of different citations. One is anonymous, 1989, and the next one is Mares down there a little bit further, Mares 1992, Yates and Estes 1992. So there are different ways to do citations in papers, and that's two ways right there that you can do them. One at the end of the sentence, or you can make a citation to use in the middle of the sentence. For instance, Gardner 1992 said this, or Mares 1992 said this. For example, on this sheet, it says the NSB stated this is urgent. Without a reversal in current rates of habitat destruction and species extinction, a comprehensive systematic survey will be possible only for the next 10 to 20 years. All right, so that's basically what I wanted to talk about on this part. Okay, so the one of the things that's important to remember when you're making your citations that you can make the citation at the end of your text of each of the paragraphs or inside the paragraphs themselves. So there's two different ways to do it. So I prefer that you use either way or whatever way makes the most sense to you. Another thing to remember is that when you're making citations, that the names of the species seem like a citation. And for instance, the name of the species, over on the right-hand side of this screen, we see Linstoia simoni Schocke 1896. Well, that name, Linstoia simoni Schocke 1896, that's not a citation from the reference. That is the actual name of the person who is the authority for Linstoia simoni. So Linstoia simoni was described by Schocke in 1896, but Schocke had described it in a different genus. That's why there's a parenthesis around the name of Schocke 1896. Very interesting how that goes. Okay, on this part of the paper, we can see that we have a phylogeny of the different species of Linstoia. There was one group that occurred in Australian marsupials and monotremes, and one group that occurred in South American marsupials. Okay, in this part, this is the literature review. And I wanted to just go through what a literature review is for you, so those of you who are doing a literature review will be able to get in there and really do a good job. So what is a literature review? Well, a literature review is a summary of a topic based solely on reading current and past scientific literature. This means that the review is based on reading a whole bunch of papers and then summarizing the papers in a kind of meta-analysis. Well, the next question is, what is scientific literature? Well, scientific literature can be considered individual papers, monographs, which is a book-length paper on a subject, or books that have been, for the most part, peer-reviewed. Now, the question is, what is peer-reviewed? Peer-reviewed means that the paper was written by a person like a scientist, like one of us, and when the paper is written by us, then it's submitted to a journal. Then the journal editor sends the paper out to reviewers, and they review the paper and say whether it's a good paper or not. So that's what peer review is, and that's why that's one of the most important parts of scientific work, is that peer review papers get published, not just papers that anybody can say anything they want. So that's an important point. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into how we, at the 23-minute mark here, or 23-minute mark here, I'm going to show you how to go into UNL libraries and go into the resources and collections and how to find references that we need. So basically, in our Web of Science, we clicked on Web of Science there. Now we're going into the Web of Science, and we're going to look up FISA, which is one of the genera of snails that we're working on. And we'll write FISA, and we'll do a quick search here under FISA, and FISA in echinostomes, and we're getting all kinds of data on echinostomes. Zimmerman, Luth, and Ash published this paper in 2014. Differences in snail ecology lead to infection pattern differences in echinostoma, etc. So there's a lot of information going on. There's lots of information you can get from very, very simple searching in the Web of Science. Okay, once you've collected your data set, then you can email the records from your research, from your search, and you can mail it to yourself. So that's what's happening here. I'm sending it to myself. I didn't put any notes except for FISA and echinostome. And that's all. That's all we did was FISA and echinostome trematodes, and then we click send, and it'll come into your mailbox with all of the references that you have that you've sent to yourself that you can use for your paper. FISA echinostome Nebraska, and in this case, we decided to try to use Google Scholar to see if we can get some different results. And indeed, we are. We're getting many different results because we asked for FISA echinostome Nebraska, and it is giving us different search results based on where the people might be. Like Yvonne Kanev lives in Nebraska, for instance. Identification of echinostome trematodes. This is the second one down here. Echinostome trematodes based on experimental evidence. And then we'll go down and just look at a few of the other research results from Google Scholar. I'll move on here to how to cite a journal article. So the way I want you guys to cite the journal articles for your paper is like this. So it says Gardner, comma, S period, L period, semicolon, Campbell, comma, M period, L period, space, 1992, space, parasites as probes for biodiversity, period, Journal of Parasitology, period, 78, colon, 596 to 600. Exactly the same as the journal article that I have in my curriculum vitae, which is available on the web. Actually, it's available on our Canvas site. So use that method for citing journal articles. For books, articles in books, or books themselves, check out my CV, and you can see in my curriculum vitae how to do a book citation. All right, so now we'll move ahead here a little bit further, and I'm going to show you how to write the book citation, one by Brooks, Hoberg, and Boger, The Stockholm Paradigm, Climate Change and Emerging Disease, University of Chicago Press, Chicago, Illinois. And then we put in the number of pages, and that's all we've got for that reference. So that's how you do the citation for a book, Brooks, Hoberg, Boger. But use the same formatting too. So Brooks, comma, D period, R period, semicolon, Hoberg, same thing. There we go. So that's how we do it. So those are the two main ways that you'll have a journal or a book article. And that's all you need to do to put in your proposal or your research project. There's also something that we call the gray literature. And I put in this one because it's an important paper that was published on ticks of public health importance, published by the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare Public Health Service, U.S. Government Printing Offices, Washington, D.C. And so this is not published in like a Journal of Parasitology or a book. It's actually done by the U.S. Government Printing Office. So that's how to cite the gray literature. So now I've gone through journal article, book, and gray literature. And then if you have a book chapter, that's a little bit different too, but please look at my CV for the example of that. And then we go to, I wanted to show you in this part, with under the gray literature, now I say from Gardner and Campbell, 1992. And so if you're going to put a section from a paper, make sure you quote it like this. So this, at this point, we are at 54 minutes into the lecture, and it says from Gardner and Campbell, 1992, morphological divergence of marsupials, etc. And so you can put in the quotation that way. You won't have to use italics, but go ahead and put in quotation marks at the start and the ending. And so you have that quote directly from the reference, from the paper itself. So one of the most important things for our work here is to make sure that if you cite something or if you use something from the literature, you put in the citation. At this point, under the Gardner and Campbell part, Gardner and Campbell 1992 stated that, and then we put in a whole section again. So we want to make sure that we cite what we're putting in our literature searching in our literature review very well. So that has to be done extremely well in order to avoid any problems with plagiarism.